Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Ireland Crimes and Mysteries. I want to thank you for joining me today, and if you're a returning listener, I want to say a big thank you for your continued support. If this is your first time listening to my podcast, welcome. It's great to have you on board. So without further ado, let's get started on today's story. Ireland Crimes and Mysteries is presented by GoLoud, Ireland's leading audio publisher and the home of Irish podcasts. Find new episodes on the podcast first on the GoLoud app and on your favourite podcast platform. Today I'm joined by someone whose experience goes far beyond what most of us ever get to see. Detective John Sweetman spent 30 years in Garda Síochána, with over 25 of those years in the Garda Technical Bureau. He's a qualified fingerprint expert, a scenes of crime examiner, a security document and handwriting expert, and has given expert evidence in hundreds of court cases across Ireland. He's also the author of Identity, Murder, Fraud and the Making of a Garda Forensic Expert, which gives a rare inside look at the world of forensic policing. And now he's the host of GoLoud's new podcast, Lines of Enquiry, where he brings listeners inside real Irish investigations and walks them through the decisions, the evidence and the moments that matter. John, thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you, Nules. Thanks for having me on.
Delighted to have you on the podcast. John, the concept of this podcast is so interesting, and you are honestly the perfect person to host it. You've lived this work and you've seen how the investigations actually unfold. So I want to start there. What was it about this idea that made you say, yes, I want to tell these stories?
Yeah, like as you touched on there in the intro, like I wrote a book which came out last year detailing my career in the Guards and more specifically within the Technical Bureau. But, you know, I think it was on the back of that GoLoud reached out to me about the podcast. And I, of course, thought that, okay, they want maybe to interview me or get a bit of information or something.
Yes.
And I was flabbergasted when they asked me to be the host, because I've never done anything like that before. But and things just kind of move very, very quickly. But I also found very quickly that I enjoyed it, you know, and in much the same way as, like, you know, when I retired about 2 years ago, and, you know, put away a lot of the files and, you know, kind of put a stamp on that part of my life or whatever. Okay, occasionally get called back for court cases, stuff like that, but it was pretty much done and dusted, and it was almost like some days I'd wake up and I'd realise, geez, I did 30 years in that job and now that's it, it's gone, like, you know, and okay, I'm just, you know, whatever comes next. So it's been really nice with the podcast, with Lines of Enquiry, to go back into that world to a certain extent. And, you know, reopen some cases that I was involved in, as well as, you know, the other cases that we have in the first season that I wouldn't have been involved with, and maybe never even heard about some of them, you know.
Yes. And
delving back into that kind of world, you know, going down the rabbit hole on the internet, trying to find out about little bits and pieces. So it's been great, like, you know, and it's like a second life, a second wind.
A second wind, yeah, that's it. It kind of gives you a whole new meaning to your career, doesn't it? And how does it feel now that the show is out in the world and people are finally hearing it?
Well, it feels surreal to me, like, you know. I'm delighted that it's doing as well as it is.
It's doing fantastic,
know? And to me, it's, you know, I still can't get over it, like, you know, how well it's doing, and, you know, I'm getting good feedback on it, and I think it's just like, you know, it makes me feel very lucky to have been given the opportunity to be part of the team to putting it together. But yeah, it's just been great, like, you know.
Yeah, and do you remember your very first recording? Were you nervous on your first day?
I thought I would be more nervous, but like they put me really at ease, you know, very much at ease and no pressure. And I just, you know, I started reading away on whatever the first prepared script was, you know, or it was a kind of a draft script, and we got through it we got through the whole script, like my first read, which was
fair play to
great, like, you know, and I didn't
You're natural.
mess it up too much. Now, unlike today, I've been recording and I just can't get my tongue around certain words, but yeah, like the team just really put you at ease.
Yes, yeah,
which
they do.
means a hell of a lot, like, you know.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I'm used to, you know, I spent years going to court and giving evidence in courtrooms, which is, you know, can be very daunting. And this is I'm not saying it's easy. It's still like, you know, you still have to be on your game, you know, yourself.
Absolutely.
But it's very enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. It is. And for listeners who might not know the Technical Bureau, how would you describe the kind of work that you actually did there?
Yeah, well, I went into the Bureau in 1997. I think I'd only 4 years service in the Guards at the time, so I was very lucky to get into such a specialised section. And, you know, the Technical Bureau, as it was back then, it was made up of various different sections. You had ballistics, mapping, photography, documents, and fingerprints. So I started out in the fingerprint section. So, you know, that would entail examining finger marks, like, you know, you'd see on telly or whatever, lifted finger marks, you know, put onto backing cards and stuff like that from scenes of crime being sent in to us from all over the country. So, you know, you'd be searching scenes of crime marks against the national database of fingerprints, hoping to identify, you know, perpetrators of crimes or whatever.
Yeah.
And you'd also have to be treating exhibits from crime scenes. Like, not everything can be powdered and that, you know.
Yes.
Certain surfaces or whatever need to be chemically treated or treated in a certain way. So there's a dedicated section for that. And then, like, you know, as time went on and I got more and more training, you'd be going out to crime scenes. So we would have started off with, you know, burglaries and stuff like that. And then eventually you'd be, you know, sent along as a trainee maybe to more serious cases, you know, suspicious deaths, murders, you know, stuff like that. And it's all like, from my end, from the fingerprint end, it was all geared towards finding fingerprint evidence. But you're still part of a team. So, you know, you're always mindful of what other evidence may be, you know, possibly gleaned from a crime scene.
Yes.
So I did that for 10 years, worked in the fingerprint section, got fully qualified. Loved the work, like, you know, because, like, before I joined the Guards, I was, you know, involved in art and stuff like that. I've always had an eye for detail and maybe an ability to, you know, concentrate, and
which is important in that job.
You know, and kind of zone out what's going on around you, stuff like that. So it kind of came naturally to me, that kind of, you know, ability to zone in on something. So, as I said, did that for 10 years. And then I became aware that there was a vacancy in the documents and handwriting section, you know, which is still within the Bureau. So it was more of a sideways move, because I had an idea that maybe the handwriting end of it would suit me, you know. Yes. Which again, it's more detailed comparative work, as is security document examination. But it was the handwriting that appealed to me because, again, it leaned more into the artistic side of, you know, my own makeup and whatnot. And the type of evidence that you would be giving in handwriting cases, you know, it doesn't stand on its own like fingerprint identification does, like, which is, you know, is black and white. It's definite.
It's either the person or not,
Handwriting is much more, you know, there's many more variables involved, but it was a challenge to kind of, you have to sell the evidence that bit more. And that appealed to me, you know. Yes. And, you know, the variety as well, because every single handwriting case is different. It could be, you know, anonymous letters. It could be questioned signatures. It could be looking for indentations on paper and stuff like that. So there was always kind of a bit of variety in it, you know. And yeah, I did that then up until just before I retired. I did it for 16 years and I loved it. Like, I really loved it.
It sounds so interesting. Like, you know, did you always know you'd end up on the forensic side of policing?
Well, it was either end up in some place, some specialised place, or I'd be gone, you know, because those first few years I wasn't happy at all, you know. I just didn't have the self-confidence that, I think is needed in that job. I was terrified of going to court, all these sort of things. I just really didn't like it.
Yeah.
It didn't help that, my first station was great because it was Malahide, which is only 15 minutes from home. At least it was back then.
Yeah.
But then I got put into the command and control centre where you're answering 999 calls and dispatching cars and stuff like that, which was great in one respect in that you don't have any files. You rarely have to go to court. But then, after being in there for a couple of years and coming back out, I didn't know anything like for day-to-day policing, so I was kind of back to the start again. And I really, really wasn't happy in it until I eventually found out about the fingerprint section, that it even existed, the bureau. I didn't know much about it and was lucky to get in there. And after that, I knew straight away that
your place.
This is for me,
Yeah, you'd found your place. And then obviously the idea from Lines of Inquiry came from GoLoud, was it? And
yeah.
And was there something then that you kept hearing from the public that made you realise people were genuinely curious about how investigating actually works?
Yeah, well, yourself, and what you do on Ireland's Crimes and Mysteries, there's a massive appetite for true crime and the whole topic. And I think, as in particular, the forensic side of things, people find very interesting, and with Lines of Inquiry, what we wanted to do was, tell the stories about individual cases, in a factual manner. Obviously, it's, it still has to be entertaining, albeit, sometimes quite grim entertainment. But we wanted, very much to be authentic. And the whole team and myself, when we're looking at scripts and researching them, we try to be as factually correct about, the details and whatnot. But then, I think that's why GoLoud approached me. They wanted somebody that worked that
on the
side.
Inside.
Worked on that side of the crime scene tape. You'd see on the news and you'd see on documentaries like the guys in the white suits and stuff like that. But what exactly do they do?
That's it, you see.
Yeah. And although I wasn't involved in all of the cases that we've covered or will be covering, I do have an insight into what
absolutely
would be going on behind that aspect of it. The forensic side. So
it makes it more interesting than you see.
Yeah,
because, you have the insights. I suppose
it's a very collaborative thing because the crew is great for making sure that everything I'm speaking about is correct. But then if I come across something that doesn't sound right or it doesn't sound like the way a guard would say it or whatever, I might put in my tuppence worth.
Yeah, I better watch myself. So
no, it's just just little bits and pieces to make it that little bit, to make it authentic. Because it was the same there when I did the book a couple of years ago. I wanted to do something. I knew that what I worked at was interesting, but I wanted to be able to, if I met another guard or a mule, as we call ourselves, if I met another mule or if I met somebody that's listened to the podcast, that what I'm saying is, is accurate.
Absolutely. It is important.
Yeah,
it's very important, And I mean, true crime is everywhere, as we were saying these days. But it is a very different series, in the fact that you are on the inside and you're telling your story from the inside. What do you want listeners to understand about investigative work that they might not have realised, before they listen to you?
Well, I can really only speak from the forensic end of things, but that when a team like a technical bureau team goes to a scene, that you can't take anything for granted.
Yeah.
That seemingly inconsequential details may turn out to be very important. Yeah. And then, procedures have to be followed. Not only say when I was going out to crime scenes, I was, a fingerprint expert, but you also have to be mindful of other evidence that may be there, and that there's a certain procedure to be followed. That say if something that I want to treat for fingerprints may contain DNA and stuff like that,
yes,
you have to be mindful of that. Certain fingerprint processes will destroy DNA, stuff like that. So it'd always be, DNA would be looked for first, and then fingerprints, and then obviously if a firearm or something's involved, ballistics have to look at it first, whatever, to make it safe and whatnot. So, there's everything. It's a team that all have separate disciplines, but they work very well together.
Yes.
At a scene. Like, there's no such thing as stupid questions, which when I first started going out as a trainee, going out to scenes, I had accompany an expert. I was just really amazed that people were so, accommodating, and they'd listen to me. Like, I was a greenhorn, and they'd listen to what I maybe thought or whatever. But, I would hope, that people may appreciate the amount of work that goes into investigating, serious crimes in particular, and maybe demystifying a few myths or whatever. Like, you don't go in like you see on telly. Well, you do to some extent, but you don't just go in and shine a blue light everywhere and say, "Yep, that's it." Like, we do have fancy lights, although we didn't have them when I started. Like, but nowadays you do have all
the
these
luminol.
Kind of things.
Is that what they call it?
There's luminol and amido black and all these different things. But you have to learn so much, and the training behind it is like, the training we got was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
It's not just, right, I'm a guard and I got transferred in there, here's your fingerprint kit and out you go. You had to train.
You're starting from scratch again, basically.
You're starting from scratch. Like, you had to train for 5 years before you were deemed, and you had to pass, external exams, which were set by other experts. So you couldn't, bullshit them, And, when we were trained, and we did it over in the UK, you were getting cross-examined on some days by the Crown Prosecution Service. So, and they give evidence, standing up in the box. Like, here you can kind of hide, in the box. So if you want to slink down in it,
there's no hiding over there.
But over there, there's no hiding, So, and as I said earlier, I was terrified of court. Terrified.
Yeah.
But one thing that the training gave me, and I'm confident that it was the same for all of us that went through it in the fingerprint section. The courtroom training that we were given was absolutely phenomenal. Our final training course was almost exclusively courtroom preparation.
I was going to say, so they actually train you on how to behave, or
how to behave, court. Body language, and
right.
It was somewhat easier for me and one of my colleagues, Alan, who went on that course. And there was one other chap, I think. We were the only police there. The rest of them were civilian scenes of crime officers. So we kind of already had that kind of courtroom mentality.
Yes.
But, it was drummed into us how important it is that it doesn't matter what questions you're asked, or how much the other side, say the defence barristers, try to knock you or cloud things or make things, complicated. You always circle back to your evidence, and as a fingerprint expert, or, later as a handwriting expert, your evidence is that, this finger mark was made by this guy, and whatever else is secondary, and knowing whether to answer a question. So, sometimes, barristers are very cute; they'll pontificate for minutes, but there won't be a question there.
Yeah,
and and they might leave an uncomfortable silence, which a lot of people will feel they need to fill. But you have to.
They're trying to make you sound bad to the jury.
But you have to kind of know when to say nothing, or just go, Judge, was there a question there?
Yeah,
and it doesn't mean that you become complacent about it. There's always nerves. Always nerves when you go to court, because you have to be kind of alert and ready, But it took the fear out of it for me.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
Well, they say you have to face your fears, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
To come out the other side. A lot of the cases then that you are covering in the first season are familiar to an awful lot of people. And I have to say the Robert Houlihan one stood out to me, because I remember that very distinctly. Yeah. What were the responsibilities that you actually felt when you had to revisit those cases, that are well known to the public?
Yeah, well, again, we had to be accurate, but I think probably, foremost, it would be, be respectful as well, be respectful of the victims' families, and even like the extended families and people involved with the whole investigation, like not only on Robert's side, but also on, the O'Donoghue side. Like, you're talking about people that still have to live with this. Like, when like when I went out on jobs, you'd go do a scene, okay, you might be waiting a couple of years to get to court, and then it's done and dusted. But this stuff never goes away for victims. Like,
it's a lifetime sentence.
That's it, yeah. So, like, being respectful of that, being accurate, getting the facts right, and and then of course to make it entertaining to listen to.
Yes,
like, I don't keep using that word entertaining.
No, I know
like,
what
it's
you're
not
saying.
Entertaining,
no.
But keep it, that a listener is invested to listen to it.
Invested in the story, invested in the person.
Yeah.
The victim, I suppose. That's the way I always look at it.
Yeah, because I think the script we're working on at the moment, I think you covered already Barbara Walsh.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
It's an interesting one, and the nature of it is such that there isn't a whole lot of fact there.
No, there's
a lot of smoke, but I think it's a fascinating story.
It's fascinating. She, literally disappeared out of her house.
Yeah.
And her daughter had seen her during the night. Yeah. I feel so sorry. Because when I was doing my research, I had listened to a few interviews that her daughters gave, and I was like, oh my God, it must be horrendous. That she's there 1 minute and
just gone.
Yeah.
And then I don't think it was taken seriously.
No.
At the time.
That kind of seems to be a vibe, though, that you kind of get in a lot of the older cases.
Oh yeah, some of the older cases, and I know that another story that we've got for season 1 is an older case, although the resolution wasn't until much later, I think, with advent of DNA and stuff like that. But it was a different country back then. I even remember myself, like when I started out in the early 90s, certainly in the Guards was a different job altogether. Like,
Yes. Speaking of, you started in the early 90s, the Sophie Toscan Duplantier case, this MVAC machine. Have you ever heard of that? The one
MVAC.
It's this new technology.
It's probably,
sent it on. Is it MVAC? Have I the right name for it?
It could be vacuum metal deposition.
They've seemingly the breeze blocker that they think was used. They've taken DNA from that and it's gone to America.
All right.
So they're hoping that will once and for all.
All right. No, I to be honest with you, I didn't. I like, as much as I'm invested in the podcast, and I do watch. True crime documentaries and stuff like that, I don't pay much attention to the news.
No.
Like when you say MVAC, I thought you meant something to do.
I hope I have the right name for it.
There was
a
thing
MVAC,
called vacuum metal deposition, which is a very specific type of fingerprint development thing, which actually was used on the Robert Houlihan case.
Okay.
And it hadn't been used in a long time.
Yeah.
But I think it was on the plastic.
Right. No, this I think is new technology.
Yeah.
And seemingly it's able to get DNA from places that they were never able to
get it before.
So they're hoping now that this will once and for all tell us whether a certain person is guilty or innocent.
Yeah, well, it depends. Like, you're talking about
depends on what DNA is on it.
You're talking about an outdoor scene, open to the elements. Has the thing been preserved? Has it been kept there? But with things like DNA and that type of, they're only going to continue to get better and better and better.
Yeah.
So hopefully there's some resolution.
Yeah, it would be great, wouldn't it? 1996, I'm sure you're always amazed when a case that you've worked on years ago suddenly gets a resolution years later.
Yeah, like. Yeah, well, sometimes, like, I've been lucky enough in that most of the cases I was directly involved in had, outcomes and stuff like that. You don't always get to go to court to give evidence, but, there has been outcomes. Like, whodunits are very, very rare, especially in this day and age, But I think this week's episode on Lines of Enquiry, if I can plug it.
You can, of course, work away.
Was my first murder as a trainee. Like, I went out on that. It was a lady called Marie Dillon was murdered in Finglas in 1998, but that was a complete whodunit.
Right. For years, like?
No, not for years. No.
Just I
won't give anything away.
No, don't give anything away. Don't give the story away now.
I mean, nowadays you can't look around and you're on CCTV or you're on somebody's phone. And, whodunits are rare in that, unfortunately, most victims of murders, of violent crimes, are known to the culprits.
They are.
Maybe married to them or related to them or whatever. But this was a complete whodunit.
We'll be all interested to listen
for me,
to that
on my first murder scene, and we got a solution, or a resolution, should I say, it was great. It was a great experience.
Yeah.
Okay,
it was a baptism of fire.
It was a horrible experience, obviously, at the same time.
But it was a great feeling probably to get a resolution. So,
like, I mean, that, as somebody once said to me, there was one of the guys that worked with me in ballistics said to me, and I never forget it, we were after him at a scene somewhere down the country, and a fatal stabbing or whatever it was, and let's say the victim was no saint or whatever.
Yes.
And we were coming back and we stopped for a bite to eat, and he said to me, he says, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter who they were. They can't speak now. We're there to speak for them. And it always stuck with me, like, it doesn't matter who they were or what they did. We're there to do the job and, to hopefully find out what happened.
Yeah.
But
that's ultimately it, isn't it? Sure. What do you think people get most wrong about how an investigation actually unfolds? Like the general public, I mean.
Well, it's kind of difficult for me, having been in the job for years, to kind of look at it with the, like
I'll tell you what I used to always think.
Yeah.
I used to love CSI back in the day when it was, and I used to have it in my head that all the stuff you got through was sent to the lab and back to you within like 5 minutes. I think that's one of the misconceptions that a lot of people had
very much
20 years ago.
Very much so. You see, you got to remember is, obviously, serious incidents take precedence, but unfortunately in this day and age, there's so many serious incidents. Like, I mean, when I started in fingerprints, I think the count for murders that year was like 40 something, and maybe they were just suspicious deaths, so maybe not all of them were technically murders,
God,
whereas
it's so low
it's
compared to
skyrocketed now. And as well as that, you're also, say, within these specialised sections like fingerprints, ballistics, and photography and all this, and the forensic lab, you're also dealing with volume crime, like burglaries all over the country, everything, like, and, anything from, just run-of-the-mill break-ins, or even, material damage, traffic accidents where paint scrapings have to be analysed and stuff. The volume is astronomical. And then when you couple that with introduced new computer systems that supposedly
make things
speed
faster,
things up and actually make things much longer, it just becomes a quagmire, and people don't realise that there's no instant, occasionally there is. Occasionally you do get lucky and you're able to get, say, a fingerprint identified or a DNA profile coming back really quick or something like that. But yeah, like, there is procedure to be followed, lots of red tape.
Yeah, there's no, like in America they have CODIS where you put the DNA into the system.
Yeah.
There isn't anything like that in Ireland, is there?
There is a DNA database now, that they can put stuff through. Again, it beyond my realm,
yes. Or fingerprints.
With fingerprints, like a lot of
yeah.
people think, okay, we have, and it was introduced back in the 90s, by 96 or so, just before I came into the section, the AFIS system, which is the automated fingerprint identification system, which, it's a little bit of a misnomer. It doesn't make identifications, but it speeds up the whole process, whereas before that came in, everything had to be done manually. So you could have a couple of 100,000 sets of fingerprints in the national collection.
Oh my God.
And you have a scenes of crime mark, and you have to manually classify that mark by, counting points and, classifying it depending on the pattern, on what finger it might be and whatnot, and then physically go through.
My God,
bundles.
that sounds very tedious.
And it was brilliant, though, for getting your eye in, because you're constantly absorbing fingerprint detail.
Yes, I suppose
so.
It
was never wasted time. Yeah. It was good that way. But when AFIS was introduced, it meant that you could then scan in a crime scene finger mark, and provided you put in the details correctly, and you can nominate a pattern, if possible, maybe nominate a finger and send off a search. So the whole collection is digitally stored on the system.
Yes.
So depending on what information you had input, the computer would bring back maybe a list of, it was usually around 30 respondents that it thinks closely matches. But then you had to go through those and check them on the screen. And even if you thought you had your identification, you still went to the hard copy. You went and got the print, the set of fingerprints, the inked set of fingerprints, and the identification was made with, and still is, with your hand magnifying glass.
So you still go back to old school?
Absolutely, yeah. Because, you have to make it with the physical thing, and then even after that, you have to get it verified by at least 2 other experts. And it's the same in, any of those comparative sciences. Like, it was the same when I was examining security documents or when I was examining handwriting. You'd get your conclusions, but it would have to be checked by somebody else,
Yeah.
But, and again, that can take time,
Yeah.
So and that's the biggest misconception, is that, things don't just happen all of a sudden. It's not like 45 minutes later and the credits roll and we got our man.
Yeah.
And
that's
then,
the way you think.
And even after that, even after all that is done, there's still a whole, if it's going to go to court and all of that and all what that entails. Like, I mean, the forensic end of it is only a very, very, very small part
of it,
of, say, a murder investigation. Like, we're only one little facet. Like, we were under the banner at the time of National Support Services within Garda Síochána. I don't know what we are now, but I always thought that was an apt name, because we're there to support
the actual
investigating Gardaí, who have as well as, bringing us in.
So were you basically on call then? So you could be called at any time of the day or night to go down to West Cork or go to Limerick?
Yeah, like, it's not too... later years, it wasn't so bad, because like, people started building roads. But, like...
motorways.
Back in the 90s, like, if you had a job in Cork or something...
5 hours
whatever,
later.
and again, depending on what time you arrived, maybe at the scene. Like, I remember being at a murder down in out beyond Clare, and it was in the middle of nowhere. Like, okay, they had a crime scene tent up over the body and that, but there was nothing we could do there until the next morning. So but like that, you'd get called, and if a team's available, away you go.
Yeah.
And it could
be anywhere.
It could be any time, but like, we worked a roster, so you'd be working days and nights. There was always kind of cover, pretty much. Like, sometimes you get caught in the hop, or sometimes you'd be listening. I won't say, like, you might be listening to the radio on the way into work, and you say, body has been found, and whatever. Belmullah to be like, oh Jesus, like, will I turn around or will I keep going? Like, but
Google Maps.
Yeah, that's the way it was. Just you get a call out and away you go.
Yeah, and come here, of all the cases that you've worked on over the years, is there any that stands out to you that you still kind of carry around with you to this day?
Well, I made a point of never carrying anything around with
maybe
me,
that's the wrong wording, I suppose. That you just
I know what you mean, yeah. Like, obviously, as I touched on there, like, say, my first murder scene.
Yes.
And then prior to that, maybe my first scene with a dead body, like, which turned out it wasn't suspicious, it was suicide or whatever it was, like, you don't forget those things in a hurry. You don't forget certain things, certain sights and smells, like, these type of things, but you don't become desensitized to it. It's not the right word, because I think I was talking to somebody about it only yesterday, and very quickly when you go into these nastier scenes, there is that shock to the system and shock to the senses. Like, it's not natural that you're seeing this stuff, but very quickly you turn into work mode.
Yes.
And it's amazing how quick that happens.
Yeah.
Because you might be spending several days in the scene. Okay, the body will be, removed at a certain time, but you might still be there examining stuff for a few days.
Yeah.
But you're always there with other people, the rest of the team, and everybody has everybody's back, But as regards to I found probably ones that stuck with me more were actually handwriting cases where I wasn't out at some horrific scene.
Right.
But, depending on the cases, like, you might be dealing with suicide notes or letters left by victims of crime or letters left by perpetrators of crime and stuff like that. Right. And there was a few of those types of cases. I don't know if I can talk about any of them or like that I was involved in. And, in looking at the writing, it's almost like a time machine. You go back to the point in time where somebody had, put pen to paper.
Yes.
And there,
it was a moment in time.
There was a girl killed. She was murdered up in, I think it was up in Donegal somewhere. It was towards the end of my career, Jasmine McMonigal. And her partner killed her or whatever, but she had written a letter to him only a couple of weeks prior to that, and really standing up for herself, being very brave and about what she was going to do and all that sort of stuff. And I found that that kind of
that's be kind of
touched on me,
that would
and
be.
As a handwriting expert, you don't really concern yourself with the content. You're looking at the letter constructions. You're looking at all of these different things, but you can't help soak it in. But you're going over it and over it and over it and over it. That one stuck with me. The Midlands Letters case, which we had on Lines of Enquiry there a couple of weeks ago. That was probably the longest handwriting investigation I had, because it went on for a year and a half, I think. And the volume of stuff in that was huge, and it was nasty stuff. But then, as I say, suicide letters and stuff like that, which, there's no crime disclosed. It's
somebody at their worst moment in their lives.
But you still have to prove these things were written by the person, so as to give maybe some closure to the family or whatever, or maybe down the line you might have a coroner's inquest. Like I did the examination of the letters that Alan Hall left.
Oh yes,
after he had killed his wife and kids,
I actually read her sister's book there, Reese, Jacqueline.
And although I wasn't at that scene, thanks be to God, I still had some kind of
you were
there was some kind of
into his mind,
and of course I went to the inquest, and which was very, very harrowing kind of stuff, They be the type of ones that stay with me,
Ones involving children as well, obviously.
Yeah, there was a couple of those where, involved with kids and stuff like that. But it's surprising what may affect you and what doesn't.
Yeah.
It could be just one little thing, and
it would catch you.
It would catch you out, yeah. Now, thankfully, for years now, there's great supports there. And I think now, any time a team goes to a job that might be distressing or whatever, they have options there, and for counselling that's across the board. But when I started out, there was kind of like suck it up, go and have a few pints, whatever,
talk it out.
That was
amongst
it, talk it out, or gallows humour and stuff, and it worked to a certain extent, But I say it was a different time back then.
You're looked after better now.
Oh, very much so.
Because it is harrowing, and I suppose what people have to remember at the end of the day is that Gardaí and people like yourself, detectives, you're only human.
Oh yeah,
at the end of the day, people forget that though.
It's like anybody working in the emergency services or anything like that, doctors and nurses and stuff like that. They're just human, they
all have their own families behind it. And and you can be affected, In your experience, what do you think families would need most during an investigation? The families, say, of the victims, what do they need most from you? Is it to get it solved quickly, or is it support, or
I would
both?
say, well, obviously both. If it's dealing with somebody that's missing or somebody that's been killed or something like that, is obviously solve it quickly. But I would think probably honesty.
Yes, honesty.
Openness. In as much as possible, obviously investigators in serious crime, things like murders or whatever, you have to be careful what information is shared, because
it's an ongoing investigation.
It's an ongoing investigation. It may, it may help to sort out the wheat from the chaff later down the line. But be in as far as possible, be upfront and be honest with families and of victims and stuff like that.
What I've noticed, from doing the podcast, especially say with missing persons cases, is what they kind of want or need changes as the years go on. Initially they're wanting, obviously, the person to be found, and they're wanting justice and all that. And as the years, say if you're going into 10, 20, 30 years, they just want the person home so they can bury them. They're like, please, I don't care, just I want to tell me where they are. anonymously even.
Yeah, and it just gets more and more frustrating for them, like, you know, and then as time goes on and, you know, trying to organise maybe searches and digs and stuff like that, again, going back to what you said earlier, it may take a long time. Sometimes it can take years.
Yeah.
And maybe at the end of that, you're still none the wiser.
Yeah, because, you know, you'd often be saying, there's nothing going on. I'm not saying any particular case, but, you know, you'd be kind of looking at a case and you'd be going, I don't think they're doing anything on that case now. And the next thing you hear, there's a dig going on, something. So they are working away in the background.
They're always trying. Like, I remember being on, and I think that job I mentioned in Clare, and it was on that job, and the first night we arrived, like, we didn't get to the scene, so we just went to where we were staying, and there happened to be some senior detectives there from NBCI, the National Bureau of Criminal Investigation. And it was around the time of the Rachel O'Reilly case.
Oh,
you know? And it had been everywhere. It was all over the media. But it had gone quiet. And I met the super from NBCI was having a pint there. And I just happened to say to him, like, you know, what's the story with that
what's going on? Yeah.
And now he was cagey enough, as he, you know, every right to be. But he just said, well, we're working on something.
We're getting there.
You know, we're getting there. And sure enough, like, it cracked open shortly after that with the mobile phone evidence and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
So even if it appears that nothing's going on, it's not that nobody's...
Yeah, well, as you said, they can't talk about an ongoing investigation.
Talk about it. And, you know, in a lot of cases, there is no more. They haven't got any more information.
You're waiting for a lead.
They're waiting. And particularly with the Barbara Walsh one, which, you know, we're working on now. Okay, it's 40 years ago. But, you know, hopefully somebody might hear it and say, yeah, I heard something, or maybe now it might be something that the guards heard about before. But, you know, any information at all.
And could that sometimes be genuinely enough? Just that one person coming forward with that tiny bit of information that they think is irrelevant.
Oh, it could be.
That could be because I'm always saying it to people, like, you know,
because you might have one unconfirmed report of something.
Yeah.
But if you have another one saying much the same, you know, then you're like, hang on, maybe we'll look further into that or whatever. But again, like, it could be anything, it could be like inconsequential things.
Yeah.
And you just don't know, like, you know, it might be that little bit that makes the difference.
And people could be carrying that around for years thinking it's nothing.
Yeah, and it's not out of malice or anything like that. No. It's just that it appears inconsequential or whatever, but it might fit into something somewhere, like.
Yeah, the most frustrating cases, I think, must be where you know who did it, but you can't get the final piece of the jigsaw.
Yeah.
Like they're walking around.
They're walking around, like, and just for one thing or another, you know, there's just don't have that enough to push it. Like, you know, the DPP won't go with it or whatever the case may be. You know, there is a few like that. But
are those cases, like a lot of those missing persons cases now that we all know about, and even ones we don't know about, is it true that they're harder to, because there's no crime scene, there is no body? Like, are you kind of like, is that a big problem?
Yeah, like, that's a big problem.
Yeah,
like, you know, like, if you don't have a body or an obvious site where a body has been or something like that, like, you're lacking. You know, and I don't mean to be heartless about it, but in such cases, the body is the single most important exhibit.
Yeah.
You know, that's there.
It's
and it can or maybe have on it all different types of trace evidence. You know, and not only the body, say, whatever site it's at, maybe soil composition, all sorts of... It's just, you know, you're without any location or remains, it does make it a lot more difficult.
Yeah,
you know?
I always thought that myself. I was kind of going, like, because there's so many of those cases out there that there is no body, there is no crime scene, and, like, they're going on 30, 40 years now, like, you know.
Yeah.
It's
like, I mean, only recently there in recent years, like, there was Elaine O'Hara, you know. That's
a prime example of how when you get that little bit of information.
And a bit of luck, like, you know, the way the guards were able to spot this stuff in the reservoir because the water was low and it
But fair play to that Garda for going back the following day
and
again.
then the person that actually found the remains up in the mountains, like, and so a bit of luck as well.
There was a lot of luck there, actually, because it kind of happened within days of each other, didn't it?
Because like, we all thought it sounded very fishy that this, you know, I think he was a junior.
It had gone on for nearly a year.
Just went out and looked and got it, like, you know. But I think there was a second person went back and found more stuff.
They found her Dunn Stores card or something with her name on it, like I think.
Yeah.
No, it's amazing. It is amazing, like, you know. After decades then in the job, what now brings you calm and balance these days after such a career?
You know, I was always, I don't know about balanced, but I was always reasonably calm, you know. I'm loving going back and looking at these things, particularly the ones I was involved with, and the ones that I know nothing about. I find it fascinating, but going back and looking at it without the kind of Garda spectacles on, or worrying about court, or worrying about doing this a certain way, and it gives you more of an insight or more of a realisation, really, that, Jesus, what you did there for years was fascinating, you know, and very important, and, you know, maybe pat yourself on the back a little bit. Like, I'm not one to do it that often, but that's, like, I found that going back to it, and, you know, what I thought was gone after I retired, and, you know, the book came out and stuff, and I put that away. That's done. Lo and behold, you know, GoLoud gives me a call out of the blue, and it's opened.
And now your life
again.
has gone down another.
And it's great,
track.
like, you know, because to put so much time and training into the work you do in these, you know, in these sections, for it to just stop and be gone, it's a bit jarring, like, you know. I'd
say so, like, because it's such a high kind of octane job, and then suddenly you're going from that to going for coffee and playing golf.
Like, I mean, it's not, well, you know, a lot of the time you'd be sitting at a desk, like, looking at things or whatever. It's not all running around the place.
No, but it's still like you've got purpose. You've got major purpose.
Like, I mean, I before I retired, I briefly went back into the fingerprint section for a few months, and when I started getting a couple of identifications again, and I still got the same rush out of it as I did back, you know, in 97 or whatever it was when I started. You know, so, and it's nice. It doesn't leave you, like, you know, and it's nice to be able to go back to it and to talk about it with people like yourself and stuff, because, you know, I do think people are interested in it. I like talking about it. You know.
It's extremely interesting. It's extremely interesting to hear it from an inside perspective, because I know, like, obviously you can't talk about them when you're actually still working. And that, like, you know, so it is, like, you know. And finally now, I'll stop questioning you. I'm like a Garda myself now. I'm, like,
don't say vehicle, anyway.
Vehicle. Oh, yeah. Vehicle.
Car.
What do you want your listeners to take away from Lines of Inquiry as they follow the series? What would you like them to actually take away from the whole series?
You know, as you've said, like, you know, some of the cases are very well known, some aren't. But even with the ones that are well known, I would hope that the listeners come away with maybe some more knowledge about it. You know, they mightn't have heard before. And maybe, you know, some insight into
the workings
that go on, you know, even little things that mightn't have any bearing on the case, but, you know, it adds a little bit of colour, a little bit of character. Like, I kind of demystify the whole team turning up in the white suits, like, you know, demystify that they're just people there to do a job. It's a specialised job, but and again, as I say, to be respectful and mindful of the victims and families and stuff, but just that it's interesting, you know, and that it's important to keep telling these stories, even if you've heard about this particular investigation or that particular investigation. It's still
it gives the victims a voice. I think that's what I think. You know, like, it keeps them alive in a respectful way.
Absolutely,
you know, because like they always say, you die twice, isn't it? The day you die and the last day your name is ever spoken.
And like, it's important to keep these things in in some form or other in the public mind, like, you know, and we're already racking our heads for further stories.
For
like,
season 2.
And hopefully a mixture of, you know, obviously ones that are, you know, well known, but also ones that people haven't heard about,
yes.
you know.
Yeah.
And get them out there, you know.
Absolutely, because I even find that with, because I've interviewed a few people now, families of missing people, you know, that their story didn't kind of make the headlines like others did.
Yeah.
And you'd be saying how unfair that is, because some of them get, and I'm not saying they should all be getting the same time in the media, but like, so it's great to be able to give those kind of people a voice as well, like, you know. Yeah. So listen, John, thanks so much for your time.
Not at all.
And for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us today. It was so interesting. You know, I think the listeners are going to get so much out of the series, to be honest with you. And you can find Lines of Inquiry on the GoLoud app or wherever you get your podcasts. I really think you should all listen to it because it's so compelling. And John's unique perspective, drawn from decades inside real investigations, is a rare insight you don't often get. So I urge everybody to download and listen to it. So guys, that's it for today's episode of the Ireland Crimes and Mysteries podcast. Again, thanks for your listenership, and don't forget to subscribe to the show and hit that auto download so you never miss an episode. Until the next time, keep your eyes open and your mind curious. This podcast has been compiled from information gathered in the public sphere, like news articles, documentaries, and open source material that can be found on the web. Everything in this podcast is alleged unless a conviction has taken place.